Good morning everyone. Welcome to the Sprinkler Systems Service and Maintenance Requirements webinar from the FPA and Risk Authority. My name's Dale Kinnersley. I'd like to just introduce myself as a requirement of the CPD award. This has been awarded 45 minutes CPD, and to enable this award to be provided by the Chartered Insurance Institute, I have to provide you with my credentials. As can be seen on there, I'm a qualified sprinkler design engineer. I have a European Fire Diploma in Fire Prevention. I'm a member of the Institute of Fire Engineers. I'm also a member of Engineering and Technology Institute. I'm former technical director for Argus Fire. I've done 29 years in the sprinkler industry, and within that time I undertook gas design, mist design, water mist that is, foam, enhanced sprinkler systems, deluge systems, fire detection systems. I'm now the principal consultant at the FPA. I'm also the convener of the Risk Authority Sprinkler Rules Working Group, which develops the LPC technical bulletins. And I also sit on the BSI Sprinkler Rules Committee, developing the British Standard Sprinkler Design Rules. Also included within this webinar to meet the requirements of the CPD award, I have to provide you with the learning outcomes associated with this webinar. So the learning outcome that we're trying to understand and establish today is the requirements under the fire safety order. I'm going to go into a quick brief on the LPC rules and BSEN 12845, the requirements for owner and occupier, the responsibilities for the contractor, the service frequency requirements and what's got to be serviced and maintained, so that you have an understanding of the equipment that you have and when it should and should not be maintained. Compliance requirements, whether the system, the service that you have on your sprinkler system is compliant or non-compliant, and also keeping the records, making sure that there's adequate paperwork to establish that when anybody's doing an inspection of the system, it's been serviced and maintained to a standard, so record keeping is a requirement. I'd also like to mention that this webinar is being recorded and the presentation slides will be freely available for downloading on the Risk Authority webinar shortly afterwards. So sprinkler systems. They're installed to guard against extremely unlikely and infrequent events, but could have very significant consequences when they do occur. As such, sprinkler systems must lay dormant for very long periods of time, but ready to operate at all times. And these factors pose some unusual system reliability and maintenance challenges. It's therefore a requirement that a satisfactory sprinkler system maintenance regime, which also includes the review of hazard, is critical to the continued dependable performance of systems, and that it's correctly maintained, including all the periodic assessments that are required, and obviously that it remains fully operational at all times. And finally, that it's appropriate to protect the hazard. So it will be no good having an ordinary hazard classification sprinkler system protecting a high hazard warehouse that has storage of high category, high fire load goods. So the Regulatory Reform Act, or known as the Fire Safety Order. Unfortunately, I'm not going to discuss this all the way through with you, but as what I've shown on the screen there, highlighted is the main wording associated with maintenance. So basically what the Fire Safety Orders actually say in Part 2, Article 17, is that if you have a fixed firefighting system on the premises, it is subject to a suitable system of maintenance, and it's maintained in a sufficient state, in efficient working order and in good repair. And that's a legal requirement. So if you have a sprinkler system on your premises, it should be serviced and maintained. What standard? Well, currently we have the LPC rules, which incorporates BSEN 12845, and this is a standard that the sprinkler industry uses. Some sprinkler systems can be designed and installed for the requirements of meeting building control and approved document B, which is known as a life safety requirement. But majority of sprinkler systems are installed for property protection purposes as required by the insurers, and that's the LPC rules. So part 1 is the BSEN 12845, and that's a life safety standard as such, a minimum standard. pretty much used for approved document B. Part 2 are the technical bulletins, which are additional requirements, and Part 3 is supplementary information. I'll just go into these a little bit further for you. So the LPC rules, as we said, Part 1. It's a British standard, a minimum standard to meet compliance with an approved document B, and it allows people to escape. It's seen as a life safety document. It's the full SEN version, and the SEN is the European Council, and it's published by the British Standards Institute. And it was first published as a standard which replaced BS 5306 Part 2 in 2003, and there's not been any real technical changes until the 2015 version, which has corrected some errors and updated some aspects. Part 2 is the property protection requirements as such. These are additional guidance notes that go over and above and beyond the requirements of the BSEN 12845. These are prepared by Risk Authority Working Group, which is the insurer's input. The FPA publish these largely with the insurers, but it does not represent a pan-insurer's perspective. These are generally applied where sprinklers are installed for property protection. So the property protection requirements that incorporate minimum standards for life safety, and they enhance them for the protection of property, contents and business continuity. But they're not necessarily applicable for systems installed for life safety reasons, but generally accepted as beneficial because, as I say, they build on the foundations of BSEN 12845 as the standard. And Part 3 is additional information, as we can see there. It provides helpful information for system users, and it covers additional aspects under the Risk Authority, what we call risk control working documents. So it gives you ideas on how to protect from frost, what water supply requirements are, Legionella issues, and working in confined spaces. And all 3 parts form the LPC rules for automatic sprinkler installations, incorporating the British standard BSEN 12845. This is authored by the FPA and funded through Risk Authority. So the requirements for service and maintenance. So under BSEN 12845, we have clause 20 and 21 as shown on the screen. And clause 20 just breaks the service and maintenance down from weekly requirements up to 10 yearly. And clause 21 is talking about having an independent person inspect the sprinkler system on an annual basis. These are also supplemented by Annexes K and Q, which are also part of 12845. Together, these service requirements range from now weekly up to and including 25-year maintenance inspections. So Annex Q actually replaces Clause 21 and actually calls for an independent annual inspection. And Annex K goes on to for a requirement of sprinkler head inspections and pipework inspections, and these together represent the best practice for service and maintenance under BSEN 12845. However, as we are Risk Authority in the FPA and we produce the LPC rules, we're going to discuss today the service and maintenance requirements for LPC Technical Bulletin TB 203, care and maintenance of automatic sprinkler systems. This covers all the requirements of Clause 20, 21, Annex Q and Annex K. So moving on, both 12845 and the LPC Technical Bulletin TB 203 are very similar in terms of service requirements, although the exact requirements are different within the service and maintenance frequencies. And as you can see there is quite a few requirements to be, disciplines to be undertaken frequently. And on the top of this, importantly, the building owner, occupier, or the system user has to appoint a competent person who is nominated to undertake tasks related to the service and maintenance of the sprinkler system, who have been trained, given adequate instructions on how to maintain the sprinkler system, or their responsibilities and disciplines that they should be undertaking on behalf of the building owner, occupier or system user. And that's whether they are permanent or contract staff. And like I say, only appropriately trained personnel should be permitted to undertake the testing of sprinkler systems or emergency actions. So site service and maintenance. So site staff as we can see there, it's important that they there's appropriate staff that are given suitable levels of instruction on at least the following. So they should understand the purpose of the sprinkler system, what it's there to do. Is it a property protection system? Is it a life safety system? Is it a suppression system, or is it a controlling system? How the system operates in the event of a fire. What to do if the system operates either in a fire or accidentally. Maintaining a clear space around the sprinkler head so that they can operate correctly and control the fire in that underneath that sprinkler head or within that area. The avoidance of damage to sprinkler heads and pipework that you get in warehouses where they get hit by forklift trucks, or in plant areas where things get moved about and sprinklers get damaged. And most importantly, the upkeep of records and documentation. I'd like to also say on this particular slide that it's imperative that anyone carrying out system checks has been fully trained how to carry out these routines, how to do these safely, and what to do in an emergency. We would also advocate that anybody who's trained to work on the sprinkler system is adequately trained and certified so that they get a certificate to say that they've been trained on the system and they know what to do in the event of an emergency. The owner-occupier responsibilities. Well, under the fire safety order, it's a requirement that this is serviced and maintained to a reasonable standard and fully operating all times. So it's their responsibility. As on the screen there, there shall be a programme of inspection and make sure that the checks is carried out. Arrange a test and service schedule. Keep the records, and a logbook. Most importantly, a logbook is kept on site. So that it can be referred to and completed on a weekly basis as the checks are done. The user shall arrange a test service maintenance schedule to be carried out with a sprinkler contractor, and this schedule should be fully compliant to the technical bulletin. Any deviations from this service and maintenance from the provider should be clearly highlighted to say whether it's compliant or non-compliant with regards to TB 203. And the requirements within this particular standard. The installer should provide the user with documented inspection and checking procedure for the system. So when a sprinkler system has been installed, they should be provided this information. They should be trained so they understand the system. And the programme shall include instructions on the actions to be taken, such as faults, operation of the system, emergency starts of the pumps, or details of the weekly routine. So again, owner-occupier responsibilities. This is covered in TB 203. And what it states in there is the responsible person on behalf of the owner-occupier. Once he's had training and he's got certification, they're permitted to carry out weekly checks, weekly tasks, and monthly routines. From this, that is the only requirement under the technical bulletin that they should be undertaking. All of the service and maintenance disciplines, quarterly all the way up to and including 25 yearly, should be undertaken by a service and maintenance contractor, with the exception obviously there on an annual basis that there is an independent sprinkler inspection undertaken of the system to meet compliance with TB 203. So moving on, the weekly checks. I'll now run through the required service and maintenance activities that need to be undertaken to meet compliance with TB 203. And as can be seen there, we have a standard valve set on the right hand side. So what should be done on a weekly basis? These are just checks. So recording that there is pressure on the system. Looking at the gauges there on that particular picture, there is no pressure in the system, so the system is isolated. As you can see, the valve at the bottom is shut. So that's a requirement. Check all water levels. If you've got water storage tanks, or if you're using rivers, canals, private reservoirs, that there is water available at all times. And as mentioned there, the correct position of stop valves, which control any flow of waters to the sprinkler system, they should be checked on a weekly basis. And this isn't a maintenance thing, it's just a visual check to make sure things are done. Service and maintenance tasks. Now these are things that you actually physically have to do. So we have to run the water alarm gong for a period of 30 seconds. We have to perform an automatic start on the pump's spark test. We do a diesel engine restart test. Check the trace heating, local heating systems for correct function. Most of the time when I do a sprinkler inspection, I go into a pump house and it's cold. and the heating system's not working, well, if you have a diesel pump in a pump house, that pump house has got to be maintained at 10 degrees C. And then obviously you have trace heating panels. They need to be tested on a weekly basis. And any transmission of signals to the local fire and rescue service or central alarm stations, they should also be checked. And again, these are tasks that are required of the site staff. Then moving on to monthly. There's a requirement on monthlies that the electrolyte levels of all battery cells are checked. Check the batteries are charging. And the security of the water storage tanks, including the access ladders and the ball valve housings, they're secured and locked. As we come on to a little bit later on in the presentation, you will understand the reasons why security of the storage tanks is very important, and the checking of them is very important, but that comes on a little bit later. But again, these monthly tasks are undertaken by the site's trained staff responsible for the sprinkler systems. And now we move on to quarterly. So moving on to quarterly, these following service activities have got to be undertaken by the third-party approved and accredited service provider, and provided that they are listed within their scope certification to perform service and maintenance within their approval scheme. And there are 3 approval schemes that are available. There's the LPS 1048 run by the LPCB, which is part of BRE. There's the FIRA scheme, which is by Warrington Fire, or the IFC, International Fire Consultants. They provide schemes for service contractors to be signed up to, and that they provide you with certification, and they have third-party approval to undertake these tasks. So looking at quarterly, all flow alarm devices shall be checked for the correct function. So every 13 weeks, the flow switches and the pressure switches shall be tested. The review of hazard. This is a quarterly requirement in both the British Standard and the LPC Technical Bulletin TB203, and this is the discipline that's most infrequently carried out and missing from most service and maintenance schedules, but one of the most important. This particular requirement is a review to obviously their changes of structure, occupancy, storage configuration, change of heating, lighting, equipment, the classification of the building. If it was once used for storage, it's now used for manufacturing processes. It's changed from a storage risk to a process risk. If it was an office block, it's now being converted to a woodworking or a plant room. It changes the risk, the hazard has changed, and it should be undertaken on a 13-week basis every quarter. As looking at showing the pictures there, there's pictures that we've got shown on the screen there. Show some petition modifications below false ceilings where the sprinkler system's not been modified to suit the new petition changes, and it leaves sprinkler heads too far from petitions and not covering the floor head adequately. So petition changes that have been modified. We've got sprinklers too far. Fire started in the corner. There's no sprinklers within the right vicinity to operate. It would take longer for the sprinkler system to operate. Looking at this picture here, picture 1 on the left hand side shows that the storage has exceeded its limitation for the system and the sprinkler head clearance is compromised. So we're supposed to have a 500 mil clearance from all sprinkler heads to anything below. And on this particular picture here on the left hand side, you can see a sprinkler and storage right up into the ceiling. And on the picture on the right hand side shows that there's some sprinkler modifications been done. So the removal of some ceilings, and the sprinklers have just been left there, and objects are now blinding the sprinkler heads from providing the spray pattern and discharge pattern. The heads are also too low from the soffit, so it will slow the activation time, and sprinklers then will take longer for them to operate because they're not in the hottest gas layer. And all these obstructions and all these changes have affected the performance of the sprinkler system, and this would have been picked up on the quarterly review of hazard. So the requirement of the review of hazard, so 4 checks per year is required. However, 3 checks of these allowed into TB203 can be undertaken by the owner occupier in the form of a checklist. So your incumbent sprinkler contractor will allow you to undertake these on 3 of the 4 requirements per year. However, the last final check must be undertaken by a suitably qualified competent person from the spring. So you're looking at a qualified design engineer or a qualified project engineer who's got the basic certification to allow them to go and do these checks. And the checklists cover some of the bullet points that are on the screen. So have any structural alterations been made since the last review? Have there been any changes in storage height? Are frost protection measures adequate? If you've got racks or the flues kept clear and designated by the design requirements? Have there been any problems with the sprinkler system? Have there been any alterations with the sprinkler system? These should also all be recorded and kept on file and kept within the logbook. And these are, as I say, if you haven't had these quarterly reviews done, then your system's not compliant to TB203 or even BSCN 12845. 6 monthly requirements. So alarm valves, they need to be overhauled. The moving parts of these alarm valves need to be exercised in accordance with the supplier's instructions. And if you've got any alternate valves, which are you will only have now on existing systems because they are now not permitted, they will be every 6 months. You will change them over in the wet from in the warm weather season from dry to wet and vice versa. As we're approaching the colder weather, you will move the drain systems down and change them over from water to air. Stop valves. All stop valves controlling the flow of water to sprinklers shall be operated to ensure that they're in working order, and this includes all water supply valves, alarm valves and zone valves and any other subsidiary valves on the system. And the picture on the right hand side there shows a standard dry alarm control valve set. So this is just permanently charged with air, water up to the valve and air on it, the other side on the pipework side. Still on the 6 monthly requirements, so the town's mains, if you have a water supply, you don't have a pump and tank as such, you are directly fed from the town's main, you will be required to check the flow and pressure requirements that the town's main is supplying, and this is done by using a proving pipe. And as you can see bottom left there is a valve set on there with on very left side a proving pipe. Top right picture also shows you the gauge that you read the flow on as you're checking the pressure on the town's main, and you will check the various flows and pressure requirements which are there covered on table 6. So for your different hazard classifications, there's a different pressure and flow requirement from your water supply. Also, if you have a water supply, you have a pump and tank, you have a pressure tank, you have you have duplicate pumps, etc. You need to do a flow and pressure test to ensure that these are providing you the requirements needed to supply the correct flow and pressure in the fire area for your sprinkler system. Water supplies. Still on pumps and tanks, again, we've just mentioned water supply should be tested to verify the pump shall start automatically via the pressure switches. And there's also a requirement in TB203, there's an appendix which we come on to in a few slides time, that shows you all the requirements that are been put together by the manufacturers, and you carry out a 6 monthly interim service on the pumps. So when you test the flow and pressure, you use the test return pipe and record all flows and pressures up to including the duty point of the pumps, or if your system's been fully hydraulically calculated, you add an additional 10%, so you test the maximum flow of the pump at 110% of its available duty, and you produce a curve, and this test should be undertaken by your service contractor who are third-party approved to do so. And what we would suggest in agreement with the LPCB is that you test 6 points on a sprinkler water supply, including closed valve, duty point and 4 other flows, to enable you to produce a system curve as shown on the right hand side there. so that you can then verify if the pump is performing to duty and will do what it's supposed to do. On top of that, any secondary electrical supplies from diesel generators or other sources should also be verified to operate satisfactorily, so your backup supplies need to be tested on a 6-monthly basis as well. Excuse me, sorry. So moving on to annual. So there's quite a few checks to be done annually. So on the diesel engine, you've got a fail to start test and manual restart the engine. Water storage tank, maintain the float valves in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendation. Sprinklers, multiple controls and sprayers. So your nozzles as such, you need to review the condition and clean as necessary and replace any distorted or painted devices. And as can be seen in the photo top right there, this is a common issue that you'll see on a lot of sites that sprinkler systems have been in for many years. These sprinkler heads need to be cleaned, or this particular one, as you can see, the deflector plate is damaged, therefore that will need to be removed and replaced with this similar sprinkler of the same size. Any coatings on sprinklers in harsh environments, you can get you can get jelly coatings. They need to be touched up as necessary. You should be also checking pipework supports. You should be checking visually for integrity and condition and replace where necessary any pipe that's been painted that needs to be touched up. Any protective wrapping should be checked and repaired, and check that the pipework is satisfactory earth. Replacement parts there should be an adequate number of spares or mixture of inapplicable numbers to the hazard classification and the correct sprinkler spanner for the heads. And there also should be an adequate number of spares that come with the pumps. Moving on, still on the annual. So again, fire and rescue central alarm stations, check the electrical installation needs to be done. All stop valves, examine, overhaul and replace as necessary. Pump suction chambers and screens, if you have them, it's to remove them. Settling chambers, check and replace as required. For natural water supplies, if you have them. All flow alarm devices shall be checked on an annual basis. Dry, alternate and pre-action control valves, a new requirement came in, I think it was last year, so undertake a functional test as described in TB203. So that must be performed on an annual basis, and undertake all service requirements confirmed by the pump manufacturers on an annual basis, and also covered in Annex A in Table 2 of TB203. From this as well, there is an independent inspection requirement, and this is not undertaken by the sprinkler contractor. It's an inspection on the system technically against standard. So this is done by an independent person who's qualified. It should be done on an annual basis, and it shall report whether the system is in accordance with the standard. So it could be to BSEN 12845, or it could be an LPC sprinkler system. So the report will be against one or two of those, one of those standards, and a report is written. And as highlighted in the box there, when performing a periodic inspection, it shall be undertaken by an independent body. In other words, sprinkler contractors cannot undertake this service requirement. And the reason why is that the industry would not like to have sprinkler contractors marking their own homework or that of others for their own gains. So that's why it's classed as an independent inspection. And on top of that, the qualified person is a designated individual who's got suitable training and is competent with knowledge and experiences of the system, and shall be able to perform practical tests if required. The slide now shown is the fire pump service requirements, which was agreed and confirmed by the pump manufacturers. So within collaboration with all of the main LPCB approved sprinkler pump suppliers and the risk authority, meetings were held as to the best service and maintenance requirements that covers the requirements by the manufacturers. What is required for the service and maintenance of fire pumps. Obviously we've covered earlier in the slides every 6 months. We've also covered every 12 months, and now we're talking a biennial servicing requirement. And this is covered in Annex A, Table TB 203, Table 2. And as you can see, there are various different disciplines, some applicable on the 6 months that are applicable on the 12 months and 24, but some aren't. But obviously after 24 months, there is more service requirements and checks to be undertaken on the fire pumps, and these are normally done by the sprinkler contractor, or they employ a specialist pump manufacturer to undertake these requirements. Moving on to 3 yearly, so if you have pump suction chambers screens, it's to remove the screens, settling chambers, check and clean and replace for natural water supplies, so canals, riverbeds, etc. Foot valves in any tanks that are below the water supplies. Service any foot valves in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations, and every 3 years on dry, alternate and pre-action control valves you undertake a full trip test as described in Technical Bulletin TB 203. Also 3 yearly, there is 2 different types of sprinkler tanks that are approved as an above ground sprinkler water storage tank, and they are either 3-year maintenance free or 10-year maintenance free. So please do not get confused, as some people do, that a 3-year tank is a 3-year guarantee, and likewise for a 10-year tank. The tank suppliers provide a 12-month guarantee from commissioning date, and the LPS 1276 standard that they are manufactured, installed and commissioned to basically means that they do not or should not need to be fully drained for a period of time, either 3-year or 10-year, to perform maintenance activities. As said earlier, tank security is an issue, but we'll come on to that on the next slide. But as you can see, these are a bit of a rogues gallery of findings from sprinkler tank inspections. So the top left-hand picture shows that the anti-vortex inhibitor device has become detached from the suction pipe, and there is a stone holding it down. On the right-hand side, top right, we have a lot of corrosion on the internal flange inside the tank. Picture 3 and 4 are pretty self-explanatory. They haven't been moved or exercised or cleaned for a while, and we have now got a growth within the ball valve housing on the top of these sprinkler tanks. And as mentioned earlier on in the presentation, as you can see, there is a requirement for tank security and removal of the access ladder and locking of the ball valve housing. I think the picture is pretty self-explanatory, as can be seen as to why these things are required. Anything can get inside, and usually does. So 3 yearly tanks. They shall be drained, cleaned as necessary. They shall be examined internally and externally for corrosion, fitness for purpose, and have the fabric attended to as necessary, and restored in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations. So every 3 years, if you have a 3 yearly maintenance-free tank, you must drain that tank fully, clean it as necessary, and get the tank to as near as possible in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations. And if you have a 10-year tank, so a 10-year maintenance-free tank, you shall inspect it on a 3 yearly basis in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendation again. However, if the condition or cleanliness of the tank indicates that there is a need that the tank should be drained, cleaned and have the fabric attended to in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations. However, in TB 203, it is possible to use submersible cameras, ROVs, outside the scope of regular service and maintenance to inspect a 10-year tank. Moving on from 3 yearly to 5 yearly, we have dry pendant type sprinkler heads. So a batch sample shall be removed and sent away to an independent test house for testing based upon 12259-1 standards. And multiple controls, which are also known as multiple jet controls. They are covered in, they're largely covered in TB 203. They're covered in Technical Bulletin TB 213. But the requirement still is every 5 years a batch sample is sent away and removed away sent away for an independent testing. However, it also depends on the manufacturers, because they may require them to be sooner than every 5 years. Tanks, 10 yearly, again same as the 3 yearly. A 10 yearly tank after 10 years shall be drained. It shall be cleaned internally and externally, examined internally and externally for corrosion and fit for purpose. Again, have the fabric attended to in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendation. And there's also a requirement there. Tank refurbishment works should generally aim to restore the tanks to the condition and structural integrity to that originally installed, and consistent with the applicable tank approval criteria. So for above ground storage tanks, when you do any refurbishment work to the tank, it should be restored to LPS 1276 standard, or as near to as possible. Service and maintenance. So we've moved now from 10 yearly to 25 yearly. Excuse me. So a recent change of the requirement introduced earlier this year was the inspection of sprinkler pipe work. As can be seen on the two pictures below, that we do have issues with regards to corrosion and of sprinkler pipe work, and it also depends on the environments that these pipes are installed, these sprinkler systems are installed to, and the condition of the water that's also used, and if it's been subject to service and maintenance and adequate flushing. So the new requirement that came in earlier this year is that the sprinkler contractor should provide a full detailed report on the condition of the pipe work, which identifies minimum sample requirements from the rules. What we've actually asked this time, which is an enhancement to Annex K, is that various pipes are removed from the sprinkler system. Various parts, different pipe diameters, and these are internally inspected. So the service contractor removes a pipe, he inspects the external condition of the pipe, the internal condition of the pipe, and takes photographic evidence to prove that the pipe has been removed, and it goes in a report. From there, if the pipe work condition is of sufficient issue, so to speak, then that would need to be sent off for further analysis. But what we were asking for is that they write and take photographic evidence of the pipes that are removed in accordance with the requirements of TB 203, so the number of pipes and the type pipes, so that a comprehensive report on the condition of the pipe work can be taken and provided to the client or their authorities having jurisdiction. So that's the report requirement. The sprinkler pipe itself should be flushed thoroughly until the water runs clear, inspected externally and internally by removing 1 metre sections of pipe from various locations, as I've just alluded to on the last slide. Check for microbial activities and any foreign bodies or sediment. And should you find anything, such as shown on the pictures below there, so as you can see, the condition of the pipe work there should be sent away to an independent test laboratory for a full report on the condition of the pipe work. Sprinkler heads as well. There's a picture here, is a sort of rogues gallery of the worst condition sprinklers received by the FPA for testing. So a sample of sprinkler heads have got to be removed from the system. Again, this is a similar requirement to that of Annex K. So depending on the number of sprinklers installed on the whole system, a number of sprinklers need to be removed and sent away for analysis. And these will be sent to an independent test house for function testing based on 12259-1. And these are pictures of actual sprinklers that we've had issues with. So when we are currently undertaking tests, top left-hand picture there, the valve seat has stayed in during the test. Next picture shows a painted sprinkler. So any painted sprinklers on site, they will need to be removed and replaced. Picture there shows a lodgement on the deflector plate. The next picture along shows that the bulb is operated, but it hasn't actually shattered and allowed the valve seating to be removed, so that the water will not penetrate through the sprinkler head and hit the deflector plate and provide a spray pattern. It's just lodged in. A picture on the right is pretty self-explanatory. That needs to be removed and replaced, and the picture on the left is the reason why we take these sprinkler pipes and sprinkler heads out and sent away for testing, based on the condition that we find with regards to sprinkler heads and your sprinkler system. So, excuse me, service and maintenance records. So it's appropriate records, including the sprinkler system logbook, should be kept on site in a safe and secure location. It's imperative that these records for the sprinkler system are kept and filed available for review, because not all sites like to do that, and then anybody that carries out or performs the independent annual sprinkler test, first thing they'd like to do is review the service and maintenance requirements, and if they're not available, then they don't know if the sprinkler system is serviced and maintained in accordance with, one, the standard, whether it be BSEN 12845 or LPC standards, and two, what the frequency of the visits are by the contractor and what is expected of the owner-occupier responsibilities. So it's imperative that these service records are kept and are maintained on site, especially the logbook, and the records as there for sprinkler systems that should be kept on site: as-built drawings and calculations if you've got them, equipment specifications and data sheets, any test schedules and inspections, the reports, any certification for the system, and obviously the staff training for the system. Any changes, modifications and alterations shall also be required as the review of hazard every quarter. They should also be kept on file as well. So certification. So certificates of conformity for sprinkler systems can either be the LPS 1048 certificate of conformity, or a completion certificate, or the FIRA certificate. They're dependent on the continued regular service and maintenance by sprinkler contractors. So if your sprinkler system has been awarded a certificate, it is only valid provided that there is a service and maintenance regime in place by a certified sprinkler contractor. And this is covered under the LPS 1048 guidance note. So this is an LPCB requirement under the LPS 1048 scheme. And basically, as highlighted there, the continued validity of certification is wholly dependent on the sprinkler installation being maintained and serviced by an LPCB certified or registered sprinkler installer with service included in its ISO 9000 scope. We'd also like to say that from an insurance point of view, your insurance may also be affected by non-compliance to the requirements of service and maintenance of the sprinkler system. So if you're not providing a compliant service and maintenance regime for your sprinkler system, you should please check with your current insurer to see if that has any effect on your insurance. I know time is ticking on, so we're coming to the end of it. We've now completed the requirements for service and maintenance in terms of going through the weekly to 25 yearly. Just like to recap the learning outcomes and what we've discussed during this webinar. So hopefully you've enjoyed it and learned something from it. So there's a legal requirement if you've got a sprinkler system, so a fixed firefighting system, that it's serviced and maintained in reasonable order under the fire safety order. The understanding between BSEN 12845 and the LPC rules. One is a life safety requirement, minimum standard, and the other is more geared towards insurers' requirements for property protection and business continuity. The responsibilities for the owner-occupier, the contractor responsibilities to provide the owner-occupier with a fully compliant service and maintenance regime. You now understand there is service and frequency requirements. Compliance with regards to if you do not have a service and maintenance, it invalidates your certification under the schemes, and it may also have an effect on your insurance. And the most important is record keeping of the service and maintenance activities, and anything to do with the sprinkler system are kept. Finally, I'd like to thank you all for your time and listening to this webinar. Hopefully you've all found it very informative. However, should you have any queries relating to the webinar, please send these in to enquiries@thefpa.co.uk. As mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, this webinar has been recorded and will be on the open area of the Risk Authority website. And we've also provided you a link there with a free download of LPC Technical Bulletin TB203. Like I say, this whole slide pack is available downloadable from, like I say, the Risk Authority, and also the link there to a free copy of service and maintenance sprinkler requirements. I'd like to thank you all very much for your time and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.